Let us just run through this. 1 Kings chapter 7.
We're in the first book of Kings, chapter 7, verse 1. Hallelujah.
Hallelujah.
And Solomon was building his own house 13 years, and he finished all his house. For he built the house of the forest of Lebanon, the length thereof was 100 cubits, and the breadth thereof 50 cubits, and the height thereof 30 cubits, upon 4 rows of cedar pillars, with cedar beams upon the pillars. And it was covered with cedar above upon the side chambers that lay on 45 pillars, 15 in a row. Mm-hmm. And there were beams in 3 rows, and light was over against light in 3 ranks. And all the doors with their posts was square in the frame, and the light was over against the light in 3 ranks.
So it took King Solomon 13 years to build his house. He built the house of the Lord in 7 years. So obviously he put more importance into building the house to the Most High, or the temple to the Most High. That was a dedication to the Most High. He was more dedicated to that than his own house, and he even built that first. So these are the things that we have to take out of it. I know there's a lot of measurements. You know, a cubic is about an 18-inch measurement. So you could do the measurements on your own. You could take this as an assignment to do the measurements, see what length and what height and what everything was. This is an assignment for all of us in order to understand and know the actual measurement in today's time. Like I told y'all, language evolves. Back then they counted in cubics. Today we count in inches, feet, yard, and meters. That's what we counted. And we have to, they used to have bushels and all these different measurements. Today we say pound, ton, you know, different measurements. So time evolves. We don't get stuck in one position or one way of looking at things. We evolve with time. The Most High God didn't make us a stagnant people. He didn't make us a people that stay stuck in one way or one understanding. He caused us to be able to move on and to be able to grow. Can you imagine a world without all the amenities that you got right now? Think about it. Now, every creation wasn't a great creation, because some creations help to damage the earth that the Most High God created for us to live in. But there's a lot of creations that are good. Let us go.
6. And he made the porch of pillars, and the length thereof was 50 cubits, and the breadth thereof 30 cubits, and a porch before them, and pillars and thick beams before them.
So he made a porch, some place where he could relax, some place where he could lay back. Now remember, Melech Shalomo, he already had what his father left over. He had a house that David built, but he built his own house now. Because everyone wants to build their own legacy. You ever see, like, sometimes children, their father or their mother might leave them an inheritance. And then they move on. They become successful. And then they want to build something in their name. They want to build something that they could call their own. Although they have inherited, they still want to build something of their own. And this is what King Shalomo is doing. Let us go.
7. And he made the porch of the throne where he might judge, even a porch of judgment, and it was covered with cedar from floor to floor.
Where he might judge. He's a king, so there's going to be cases that come before him. So he built himself a court where he might judge people that come in with the hard judgments that he had. He's like the Supreme Court. Let us go.
8. And his house where he might dwell, and the other court within the porch was of the like work. And he made also a house for Pharaoh's daughter, whom Solomon had taken a wife, like unto this porch.
So he made a house for himself. So everything was in proximity of each other. He made a house for himself to live in, and he also made a separate house for Pharaoh's daughter, whom he had married. Yes, people will have different houses for their women. They wouldn't necessarily. Abraham had his own tent. Sometimes you got your own room. You need your own space, your man cave, as they will say.
Man cave.
A man cave.
Talk about it. Talk about it.
That sisters might not understand, but sometimes you need a little space. You need a remote control.
Yeah,
to be
big
where
TV.
you left it. A big TV, 65-inch.
No laundry in there.
Yeah, you might need a small little refrigerator with some cold ones in it. And you need a little rug rack running around so you could come bring you the remote and the cold one. Bring me that cold one. Isha, you upstairs, can you bring me a cold one? The one I put in the freezer. So Solomon needed his own space. He needed his own spot. Unfortunately, the places that we live in, we don't live like that. So even if you cut out a little part of the house or whatever, you know, and make it your own, that's good. Let us go.
9. All these were of costly stones, according to the measure of hewn stones, sawed with saws, within and without, even from the foundation unto the coping. And so on was the outside unto the great court. And the foundation was of costly stones, even great stones. Stones of 10 cubits and stones of 8 cubits. And above were costly stones after the measure of hewn stones and cedar wood. And the great court round about had 3 rows of hewn stone, and a row of cedar beams like as the inner court of the house of Yahweh, and the court of the porch of the house.
King Solomon paid the cost to be the boss.
Yeah.
He spent a lot of money. He spent a lot of money to keep his Isha happy.
Yeah.
He built a but he did. He spent a lot of money. They say he said, what kind of stones he bought for that?
Chief said don't start that.
Sister, what sister want to read it? It said right there. What kind of stone did he buy? Huh? All these were of costly stones. That means she ain't gonna get some ceramic tile that crack up after a while. He went and got some marble. Yeah. He said, you know what? I'm not putting that stucco. I'm going to build you a brick house.
Amen.
That's what we're talking about. I'm not building you a house of wood that could burn up in a second. I'm going to build you a brick house, a brownstone with high ceilings. And all the things that you want a double door, I'll get you a double door. French doors, that's what they call us. They calling out here, French doors. High ceilings. Put some pillars in the front of it. But that's a true thing. You know, for most part, when a house gets remodeled, you see a man could almost live anywhere. As long as there's a little clean space, you can live. Most of the remodeling in homes is because of the wife. Because the wife, y'all have that thing with y'all. You know, the woman got that thing. They be like, you don't see it. You just be like, just put some walls up. Give me a TV, give me a refrigerator, and I'm good, and a couch. But the women are the ones who got that touch, that delicate. They want the finer things and the beautiful things. And, you know, when you have it and you can spend it, make your wife happy with that.
Amen.
Make her happy with that. Let us go.
13. And King Solomon sent and fetched Hiram out of Tyre. And he was the son of a widow of the tribe of Naphtali, and his father was a man of Tyre, a worker in brass, and he was filled with wisdom and understanding and skill to work in all works in brass. And he came to King Solomon and wrought all his work.
So after he built the house of his wife, he built his house. He built the house of his wife, Pharaoh's daughter. He built the house in the forest of Lebanon. Now he's going back. He got to put some finishing touches on the temple. And this is what has to be completed. Let us go.
15. Thus he fashioned the 2 pillars of brass, of 18 cubits high each, and a line of 12 cubits did compass it about, and so the other pillar. And he made 2 capitals of molten brass to set upon the tops of the pillars. The height of the one capital was 5 cubits, and the height of the other capital was 5 cubits. And he also made nets of checker work and wreaths of chain work for the capitals which were upon the top of the pillars, 7 for the one capital and 7 for the other capital.
Man, you know what that is? He's beautifying the place. When it talks about capital, it's talking about crowning. You ever see when you crown something? That's crowning.
Like the molding,
you see on the top, the molding at the top? That's when you see a simple wall with sheetrock. And then when somebody puts a crowning on it, a mold on it, but a nice looking what with carvings and stuff in it. Right. These are simple ones right here. But the ones that he put up there had designs on it, pomegranates and all types of stuff, lily flowers and all types of stuff drawn into it. That's intricate work. That means that you take time and you really acknowledge that I'm going all out for the Creator. And these were the plans that David left for the building of the temple. Let us go.
18. And he made the pillars, and there were 2 rows round about upon the one network, to cover the capitals that were upon the top of the pomegranates, and so did he for the other capital. And the capitals that were upon the top of the pillars in the porch were of lily work, 4 cubits.
4 cubits.
And there were capitals above also upon the 2 cubits close by the belly, which beside the network, and the pomegranates were 200, and 2 rows upon each capital. And he set up pillars at the porch of the temple, and he set up the right pillar and called the name thereof Yakin. And he set up the left pillar and called the name thereof Boaz. And upon the top of the pillars was lily work, so was the work of the pillars.
So y'all research that. Y'all got them phones. Yakin and Boaz, what they mean. Let us go. 23. He had 2 pillars at the entrance, and one he named Yakin and one he named Boaz. Now, who was Boaz? Was the father of who? Jesse. And Jesse was the father of who? David. And David is the father of who? Solomon. So that's his great-grandfather. He named one of the pillars after his great-grandfather. Let us go.
23. And he made the molten sea of 10 cubits from brim to brim round in compass, and in the height thereof was 5 cubits, and a line of 30 cubits did compass it round about.
This is the temple. Let's go.
And under the brim of it round about were knops which did compass it, for 10 cubits compassing the sea round about, and the knops were in 2 rows cast when it was cast.
So now remember, when the tabernacle was built, right? Right? What is it called? The Ohel Moed? Right. When that was built, and in the courtyard, what did it have there? Right? It had the altar for burnt offering, and it also had a what? A laver, a sink, so that you could wash your hands. So now what they did is everything that was in the tabernacle was supersized.
Right.
He made it a sea. This is supersized now. He's putting the splendor into everything. Because David said, I dwell in this house that's made out of cedar wood in this beautiful home, and yet God's he's dwelling in this tent. So David had it in his mind to build this temple for the Creator, right? But God told David, your hands is too dirty, son. Let your son build it. But David gave him the plans. David gave him the gold. David gave him the silver. He gave him the copper. He gave him the contacts, the contractors. He told them everybody, because David said, when I'm gone, they're going to know that I'm the one who understood to do this for God.
Amen.
And that's how the legacy, although Solomon built the temple, it was David's idea. Amen. The apple of God's eye.
Amen.
Let us go.
25. It stood upon 12 oxen, 3 looking toward the north, and 3 looking towards the west, and 3 looking toward the south, and 3 looking towards the east. And the sea was set upon them above, and all the hinder parts were inward. And it was a handbreadth thick, and the brim thereof was wrought like the brim of a cup, like the flower of a lily. It held 2,000 baths.
So this basin had 12 oxen, right? 3 facing east, 3 facing west, 3 facing north, and 3 facing south. So what? And their bodies were behinds to the back, and the basin was on top of these 12 oxen.
Right.
So this is now the new laver. This is the new place where you go wash your hands. Right, plenty of water. Because now what? We just don't have Aaron and a couple of his sons. Now, when we look at the priestly line, they have multiplied. You're talking about families upon families. This is not just 1 or 2 families. This is a bunch of Levites that are from the priestly line, because they kept having children. So there's a lot of activity going on. There's a lot that's going to be going on in this place. So this laver is just sitting there collecting water, whatever it might be. They put water in there. However they do it, this is what's happening. And this was the creation at this time. Let us go.
27. And he made the 10 bases of brass. 4 cubits was the length of one base, and 4 cubits the breadth thereof, and 3 cubits the height of it. And the work of the bases was on this manner. They had borders, and there were borders between the stays, and on the borders that were between the stays were lion and oxen and cherubim. And upon the stays it was like the manner above, and beneath the lions and the oxen were wreaths of hanging work.
You see, when the Most High God said you shouldn't make to yourself any idols to bow down to, it didn't mean that you couldn't have a picture,
right,
that you couldn't carve something out, right, that you couldn't make a molten image or something. It was to bow down to. It didn't mean that you couldn't become an artist, because then that means being an artist would be outlawed. Because you're creating things that are outlawed in our law. And that's not what it's about. It was to bow down to.
Amen.
So they were creating oxen, and they would, listen, when they came out of Egypt, they said Aaron created the molten image, right? And the people did what? They worshipped it. This was a known image, Apis the bull, that the people worship in Egypt. But now what we're talking about here is beautifying the place. Amen. You got oxen, you got lions, you got all types of cherubim. All these things are being built within the space of the temple. So now, if it was idolatry to build these things, why would they have it in the most holiest place, Amen, in our nation? Amen. Think about that. So it couldn't be talking about that. It was talking about creating it to bow down to. Let us go.
30. And every base had 4 brazen wheels and axles of brass, and they were 4 feet thereof had undersetters beneath the laver that were undersetters molten, with reefs at each side. And the mouth of it within the crown and above was a cubit high, and the mouth thereof was round about after the work of a pedestal, and a cubit and a half. And also upon the mouth of it were gravings, and there were borders, and their borders were 4 square, not round.
So in the tabernacle, how did they carry the lava? How did they carry the how do you call it, the altar to burn the offerings? How did they carry that? Anybody? How did they carry that? Anybody? With what? With what? Right, they had staves. They put staves. But now time has advanced. They can't carry this stuff with staves. So they said they put wheels on them. You see what I mean with advancement? God don't leave us stuck. God didn't tell them keep it in poles and put poles in it. This was David. It says that this was the plans that God gave David, and he gave them to Solomon. So now you're not going to be carrying a basin of brass on your shoulders. You put wheels on it.
We created wheels.
You put wheels on it. I don't know if we created the wheel, but at that point, the wheel was invented. So these are the things that actually, I think technically it was created like in Mesopotamia. So
what, the wheels?
The wheels. What was it created? Like in Mesopotamia somewhere.
The Egyptians had wheels.
But it was before Egypt where the wheel came. Yeah, so it was in Mesopotamia, I believe, but I could be wrong. So, yeah, let us go.
32. And the 4 wheels were underneath the borders, and the axle trees of the wheels were in the base, and the height of a wheel was a cubit and a half cubit. And the work of the wheels was like the work of a chariot wheel. Their axle trees and their felloes and their spokes, and their naves were all molten. And there were 4 undersetters at the 4 corners of each base. The undersetters thereof were a one piece with the base itself. And in the top of the base there was round about a compass of a half of a cubit high. And on the top of the base of the stays thereof, it was borders thereof were of one piece therewith. And on the plates of the stays thereof, and on the borders thereof, he graved cherubims, lions, and palm trees, according to the space of each, with wreaths round about. After this manner made he the 10 bases. All of them had one casting, one measure, and one form.
They went all out to beautify the house of God. They went all out to do what they were supposed to do to beautify the house of God. Let us go.
38. And he made 10 lavers of brass. One laver contained 40 baths.
Wow.
And every laver was 4 cubits, and upon every one of the 10 bases, 1 laver. And he set the bases 5 on the right side of the house and 5 on the left side of the house. And he set the sea right on the right side of the house eastward toward the south.
This was one of the greatest wonders of the world during this time. This is what we got to understand. One of the greatest wonders of, you talk about the Taj Mahal and all that stuff. Them guys used to build real temples back then.
Amen.
Real temples. Let us go.
40. And Hiram made the pots and the shovels and the basins.
Uh-huh.
And Hiram made an end of doing all the work that he wrought for King Solomon in the house of Yahweh. The 2 pillars and the 2 bowls of the capitals that were on top of the pillars. And the 2 networks to cover the 2 bowls of the capitals that were on top of the pillars. And the 400 pomegranates for the 2 networks, 2 rows of pomegranates for each network, to cover the 2 bowls of the capitals that were on the top of the pillars, and the 10 bases and the 10 lavers on the bases, and the 1 sea, and the 12 oxen under the sea.
Was Hiram an Israelite? He wasn't even an Israelite. So sometimes Israelites are not the best people to do the job. Sometimes you got to get outside help.
Amen.
Sometimes you be like, no, you know, I'm gonna give this work to this brother, to this sister, and they bosh it all up. You get the best person to do the work.
Amen.
Because Hiram was the best person
Amen.
to do the job. And he built all these things for the temple of the Creator. Sometimes we go on feelings of, you know, that's a brother, he gonna look out for me. Sometimes the brother and the sister are the best people. But if they're not qualified and skilled to do certain type of jobs, you get the people that are qualified and built to do the job. It's like you don't get an electrician to do plumbing work. Why? Because eventually you're going to have a leak again. Because an electrician knows how to work with wires. He doesn't know how to work with plumbing and stuff like that. It's a whole different thing. Let us go.
45. And the pots and the shovels and the basins. Even all these vessels which Hiram made for King Solomon in the house of Yahweh were of burnished brass.
Burnished brass. Let's go.
In the plain of the Jordan did the king cast them, and the clay ground between Sukkot and Zeratan.
Uh-huh.
And Solomon left all these vessels unweighed, because they were exceeding many. The weight of the brass could not be found out.
The weight of the brass could not be found out. He spent so much money that he didn't even take time to weigh it. He said, it's too much, just do it. But it's going to take too much time to weigh this. We just got a bunch. Let's just get all this stuff done, and that's that. That's how much brass they put in there. Let us go.
48. And Solomon made all the vessels that were in the house of Yahweh, the golden altar, and the table whereupon the showbread was of gold.
Of gold.
And the candlesticks, 5 on the right side and 5 on the left, before the sanctuary, of pure gold, and the flowers and the lamps, and the tongs of gold, and the cups and the snufflers, and the basins and the pans and the fire pans of pure gold, and the hinges, both for the doors of the inner house, the most holy place for the doors of the house, that is of the temple of gold.
So what we see is the closer we get to God, the rarer the metal gets. You understand what I'm saying? The rarer the metal gets. You know, you get that gold metal, the closer you get to God, the holier place, you get the more expensive.
Right.
That's what you give God. You give God the best. You give God the best. This is what you do. So this is what King Solomon sought out. Or King David. This is the plans that King David had left. That you give God the best. Let's go.
51. Thus was all the work that King Solomon wrought in the house of Yahweh finished. And Solomon brought in the things which David his father had dedicated. Silver and the gold and the vessels, and put them in the treasuries of the house of Yahweh. Hallelujah.
Hallelujah. The job was completed. What his father left for him to do, he did it. And this is all a blessing in itself. We got to understand that the Most High God is a blessing for us, but we have to see the blessing. King Solomon, during this time, he dedicated himself to do the job that his father left for him to do, and that became a blessing for him. because he accomplished what his father left him to do. So I thank the creator of heaven and earth for food, clothing, and shelter. I thank the Most High King for wisdom, knowledge, and understanding. We got time. And I thank the creator for this day. And I hope and pray that the Most High God will continue to be with us. Hallelujah. With that,